you will have seen from my biography, I spent on a lot of my life in industry. I started out in research with Philips as a techie and moved through general management in Philips into being initially R&D manager and then technical director in a medium-sized company in the Cambridge area. And when Keith suggested writing this book to me, I was enthusiastic because I felt the lack of such a text in my role as a technical director. We were always wanting to make the company more innovative, and all the material one could find tended to be the latest fact. That's what the academic literature was about, and there wasn't anywhere where you could get an overview of the topic, which would help us to understand where we needed to make changes in order to be more innovative. Plenty of stuff that told you if you're having trouble with project management, you do this, or if you're having trouble with personnel, you do that. But there wasn't an integrative text that you could use for guidance. So that was the thing that most interested me about this.
As Rick mentioned, the fact that the books were either too much focused on theory, so lots of theory and no link to industry, or the books written for practitioners didn't actually make any mention or weren't built on the wealth of relevant research around innovation. That was one issue. Another key issue was, as illustrated by figure 1.5 from the book, that's slide 6, if you could put it up, please, Flip. We saw that there's a real issue with innovation management, where you see waves of interest in a particular topic. So management tends to be a bit of a fashionable area. At the moment, we're hearing lots about innovation. But if you look at this diagram here, going back from 1995 until 2014, we analysed what was being written about mainly in the practitioner literature in key journals like Harvard Business Review. And we looked at, over the years, what are the waves of interest in different topics. And right in the middle of the diagram, around about 2004-05, there was a big wave of interest in disruptive innovation. Then business model innovation came along. At the moment, the big interest there on the right-hand side is open innovation. And we saw this real problem that it tends to be the latest thing, so at the moment, business model innovation, open innovation, that companies jump on, partly because management consultants are often saying, do this and it will solve all of your issues. And we started to see very much innovation management shouldn't be an area where people just apply the latest tool or technique. They need to apply a selection of tools and techniques, the right selection that fits their issues. There's not a single panacea, there's not a single tool or technique that will solve everything. So open innovation, yes, or business model innovation, these are all very important topics, but on their own, in isolation, they won't solve your issues. So those were the two main motivations around the book.
Yeah. I must say, when I introduce the pentathlon in teaching, I like to ask people to imagine a pentathlon event actually happening. You imagine yourself looking down on the stadium, and of course that reminds you that the stadium exists in the context of the rest of the world. The teams come in having been trained and having been supported by other people and so on. So although the pentathlon itself tends to be inwardly focused, you must think of it as having a context of links, proactive links to the rest of the world outside.
So what we do in the first chapter is essentially we talk about understanding what innovation is and what innovation management is. That introduces the pentathlon. It's also got this waves diagram that we just mentioned before. So it gives students or managers a very clear review what is innovation and what is innovation management. We continue this explanation around the whole concept of innovation in chapters 2 and 3, around innovation in context. Talk there about some of the things around the impact of innovation on economies and company performance. Then in the third chapter, we focus very much on service innovation. Too much of what's written in the books focus very, very, very heavily on manufacturing innovation. It is important, but you need also services innovation. And in that chapter as well, we cover public sector innovation, the way governments are trying to use innovation to find better ways of serving their citizens, and not-for-profit innovation sector is actually very, very good at innovation, as we'll see a bit later. So we've got those first three chapters that introduce innovation in depth, and then the following chapters, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, are 5 linked directly to the pentathlons. They cover the strategy, the ideas, the selection of the best ideas, implementing them, and creating a culture of innovation. Finally, in chapter 9, we come back and we put it all together and discuss how a company can use the pentathlon framework and thinking about innovation to really improve its performance. Similarly, chapter 9 will allow students to understand how they can, in a company, particularly maybe in a student project, for example, come in, look at performance and make recommendations for improvement. So that's what we cover in terms of the structure of the book. But we wanted to explain to teachers a bit about our philosophy on how case studies have been written and where they fit in the book. What we've done in the text of the book is talk about various innovation issues that organisations face, and we've talked about tools and techniques to address them. What the cases do is they illustrate exactly some of those issues and then how to actually deal with them. The case I've got up on the screen at the moment is an unusual one. This is, as I said, we've gone also into the not-for-profit sector. RNLI is the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, and this case study talks about how a charitable organisation collecting money to pay for rescue at sea around the UK and Ireland. This organisation runs all of the lifeboats around those isles. It also actually helps countries across the world with also arranging rescue and trying to improve safety on the coast of other countries. But what's innovation mean if you're in a charity? Many organisations struggle with that. Well, actually, RNLI are a leader in the way they've approached innovation. This case study explains the issues and how they're approaching it in terms of innovating in the way they do search and rescue. That's one way they're innovating. Another way they're innovating is actually the way they work with the people donating money to them. Also taking this case to illustrate that for every chapter, at least one case has got a video link. So here we've got, on this page, we've got a video link to the key manager involved. It's the innovation manager of this organisation. And he's available online also talking to give students and managers even more depth around it. So that's what we've got in terms of the cases with the book.
About the theory boxes, this is a thing we didn't have in the previous editions, and it's really our way of trying to make the book thoroughly comprehensive. We'd like to think authoritative indeed, which means that you've got a lot of material you want to put in, and the pentathlon structure helps to give that clarity. But also there's a number of slightly side issues that one would like to mention, but would clutter up the text. So this is the role of the theory boxes, and there's a particular example shown here, which is on page 266, which is quality function deployment, or QFD. That's a technique which people use in the product context to make sure that the various features of the product are clearly linked to the actual customer needs and strategic needs of the company, and also tend to link into the various technologies and competencies which are involved in the product or the service which is being used. Now, this is important for innovation in product, but it's not so relevant to other kinds of innovation. But we wanted to put it in because it's an important thing, so we put it into a side box so that people can refer to it, but it doesn't interrupt the flow of the text. Similarly, in chapter 2, I remember we've got one on Kondratiev waves, which is a theoretical idea that there are a small number of cooperative waves of innovation occur through history. And to be frank, our box there is mainly critical, saying that although it's a well-known thing that people should know about, frankly, we're not that keen on it. And that is a feature that we've tried to retain. There's a lot of theory in this book, but it's not presented necessarily uncritically. In fact, there's an awful lot of new things in the book. It's worth mentioning that we think we've looked at over 200 new papers in this major rewrite, which is the third edition. So that makes it all the more important to keep control of the material via these theory boxes and the structure. Sure, yes. There is a teaching manual that goes with this, which is pretty long. It's, I think, 100 pages or so. And it's got two sections, as you can see. The first one is some suggestions on course structures, how the book can be used in a variety of courses. We teach to undergraduates, engineering students who are slightly different, MBAs, and of course executive teaching. And for each of these kinds of courses, we give some suggested internal intended learning outcomes, a structure of the possible course, and some suggestions on how you can do assessments. The various courses will be different, and of course, we're not suggesting that anyone will follow our suggestions here slavishly. These are merely some things that people may take on board in designing their own courses. We don't have a monopoly, heaven knows, of wisdom in how to teach this topic. So that's the first part is introductory, and then there are specific teaching notes per chapter.
And as Rick said, in the suggested course structures, these are ideas. We've also collected some of these ideas working with colleagues. So for instance, this time we've got something around undergraduate teaching as well. We found increasingly teachers are taking this text as well for undergraduates. So there's both some ideas about how to structure in there, which is quite a different set of students to work with. And also some notes about those type of students, how they need far more consideration of the case studies in understanding tools and techniques. Now, when we come to the second major section in the instructor's manual, there's teaching notes per chapter. What have we got in there? We've got an introduction, just a reminder what that chapter covers and what would be the aims of teaching it. Then, as it says on the list here, we've got using the book's case studies. What does that actually mean? It means for every one of the case studies in that chapter, we explain how we use that case in discussions, for instance, in the learning, where we might ask some students questions, we might be assigning students some work around the cases. So we're giving very clear ideas about how those case studies in the textbook can be used. Plus, we give some other discussion topics. So we give teachers there who are using this material, how can you get discussion going with the class. Going down as well, very often we've got in chapters as well practical exercises, things that we think it's useful for students to do in understanding the topics, for instance, on creativity. There are a couple of exercises in there that can make it interesting in the class as well, bring some of the theory and the tools and techniques to life on that. Many teachers, particularly at the M level, so particularly on MBA courses, will be using the textbook in addition using full teaching cases, and there for each of the chapters we've got recommendations, notes on cases we've used ourselves, and obviously the reference numbers to obtain those from the case centre, etc. Then of course we recommend multimedia material. Now there's a wealth of material on the web, but also the problem with a lot of that is not particularly good. So what we've done for each chapter is to give recommendations on video type material and the multimedia material we find very useful and we've actually used, and we think the ones we find useful rather than a very long list of things where teachers will then struggle to find what's useful. So it's very much a selected list on there.
But on the other hand, it's very clear that this stuff is a moving feast, and in a year or so's time there will be new material, and of course teachers will want constantly to keep in touch with that and add their own stuff.
Finally, in each chapter, we've got notes on the questions in the textbook. There are questions for students to promote their deeper thinking around topics in the textbook. We've got notes on the type of answers we expect in class, or if they're being used as assignment, the type of answers we'd expect back. And we've also got multiple choice questions for the students as well, plus answers available on the companion website. Now, for every one of those sections of the book, both in the suggested course structures and teaching notes, there's some extra tips we've got.
Yes, we've, since both of us have been teaching this topic for a long time, and we've also talked to and sat in on teaching from a lot of colleagues, we've given a number of tips on things that may be useful ways to approach particular topics. Just to give a couple of examples, we've got a bit about when you throw out a question to a class to talk about in pairs or small groups, how you can detect when to stop the conversation and move on. There's one there also on handling a large class doing road mapping work, and we found, for example, that it's very good idea to do that on the walls of a large room, so everyone is in the same room together, rather than in separate classes, in separate places, because it's easier to take control, and also the buzz of interest which the one group generates from another helps the thing along. So those are our tips, but also we've asked a number of colleagues who are particularly good teachers of this topic to give their own master classes. So each one has got a picture and a little introduction to the person concerned. So it's not just our tips, it's tips from other people as well. So this is all part of the mix that people may be able to use. And finally, we've got a complete collection of slides. The slides are just one slide per case study, and one slide for each one of the diagrams in the book. Again, we don't anticipate teachers will use all of these, but they're there for people to pick up.